You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Hello and welcome to the Choose FI Radio podcast. Today on the show, we are going to be diving a little bit deeper into this military path to FI. We have done well over 100 episodes, actually at this point, well over 150 episodes. And to be honest with you, although we touched on this idea of leveraging the pension and what that would mean in the episode that we did with Grumpus Maximus, we really haven't explored the incredible benefits that are available to military members that are pursuing this particular path as a way to reach financial independence. And frankly, that's an oversight. So I am incredibly excited to welcome Military Dollar to the show and have this particular episode. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing really well. I was astounded, actually, when we met Military Dollar at our Camp Fi in April, how many military members there were at that Camp Fi. I think it was something like 20%. So there is an enormous audience for this message. And I'm really excited to talk through this. So with that, Military Dollar, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Do you have like a disclaimer or something that you could start the episode out with?
Sure. This is my public affairs disclaimer. All views that I'm going to express today are my own and do not reflect the views of the United States government, the Department of Defense, or the United States Air Force. So I have to get that out. So now I can say we can talk about whatever.
Oh, man, I'm glad we could get that out of the way. Now we can really break down the gates of the path to FI. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This is going to be a blast. Brad wasn't kidding when he said that there is a massive military population that realizes that they have some incredible benefits and opportunities that frankly aren't available to people that aren't considering this path. As a result, they're looking for content that can help them tailor this strategy to kind of both the obstacles that they face as well as the opportunities. So we think that you are just the absolute perfect person to help us go deep into this particular strategy.
There's so many things that the military offers that can really help set somebody up for success very early on in their life, so that after 20 years in the military, if you want, you can absolutely stop working for pay and go on and do whatever is meaningful for you, whether that is working at another job or volunteering or sitting on a beach or whatever it is that you want to do.
Having said that, the stereotype is often that the members may be paycheck to paycheck, that the money kind of gets strapped. I mean, there are a lot of outside forces that are marketing to this particular segment of the population, and it's not uncommon to see the military member with a very poor financial ground game. Do you have any insight on that? And in particular, what people really do have to watch out for, and in many cases, what they're having to dig their way out of before they can really get even started with taking advantage of some of the opportunities that are available?
Yeah, so one of the things that people really need to remember when you're talking about the military is people often join the military when they're very young. They maybe have never even moved out of their house, and then they're immediately sent off to boot camp and become a military member. So they might not have had a few years of living on their own before they start earning this full-time paycheck to kind of get experience in what it's like to live in your own place and pay your bills. So what ends up happening is they start earning this relatively good paycheck. It's a middle-class paycheck. All of a sudden they have all this money, but they don't know how to budget necessarily. They don't know about credit systems and what a good loan interest rate is going to be on a car. Nobody has ever taught them these things unless their parents taught them. So all of a sudden you're handing, it might be an 18-year-old kid $40,000 a year or the equivalent because he's probably living in the dorms, but he does have a decent amount of money to spend because he's not needing to pay for an apartment. He's not needing to pay for any of his food. He gets a uniform allowance, so some of his clothing is paid for. So he has all this money that he can spend on whatever. And right outside the base is a lot of people that are willing to help him spend that money. So you will see a lot of shopping centers. You will see a lot of car salesmen. You will see payday loan people in case something goes wrong and they need money that they didn't have because maybe they took out a car payment with a 30% interest rate on it. If they don't get a good baseline knowledge on how to spend their money, they can very quickly find themselves in trouble.
Is there any type of financial education that comes from the military at all? I mean, you're throwing, like you said, 18-year-old men and women into this, right? Out of nowhere, out of high school, potentially, and they're earning a nice salary. Do they have any type of financial education at all?
There is a lot of financial education available at all of the bases, but most of it they are not forced to go to. So they might have to sit through a commander's call where they'll get a 10-minute briefing on what the thrift savings plan is. So for all the civilians that don't work for the government, the thrift savings plan is basically a 401k. They might get 10 minutes on that they're forced to sit through. But if they really want a good baseline education, nobody is going to make them do that.
Have you been a part of any units where you've seen commanders actually go through financial education? Like, has there ever been like an officer who comes from the FI mentality that actually tries to help the people in their command?
Nobody that I have ever worked for did that. However, in the last couple of years, I've started spreading the word to friends of mine. And now I know that my mentor, who is what we call a full bird colonel, she's an 06, she has really gotten into this. And so she has started spreading the word to the commands that she's in charge of. She was in charge of a training command, so she started telling them about it. But for the most part, no, this is not something people talk about because the military is just like the rest of America in that talking about money is just not something that most people do.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And when you're talking about that colonel, that 06, when you said she got into this, is she into FI or is she into just financial literacy?
I don't know if she's in the Choose FI Facebook group, but there is a military group called Military Fire on Facebook. And she reaches out to me occasionally to ask me questions about how to spread information on financial independence and investing to these young airmen, because we're in the Air Force. She has set herself up, whether it was intentional or not, I don't even know, but she has set herself up so that when she retires, she and her husband are going to be able to fully retire. They're not going to need to work again. They've actually made some very wise choices over the years.
So going back to talking about poor choices. So when you're describing these young airmen who are making, let's say, I think you said $40,000. I mean, to me, it sounds like this perfect petri dish for FI life. They're getting clothing allowance, they're getting their housing allowance, and what do they have to spend on? You would think many of them could get like a 60+% savings rate, but obviously then you're describing the dark, seedy underbelly of payday loans and 30% interest car loans. Have you seen anyone be smart right out of the gate, or is it a cultural issue? Is it a cultural issue that these young men and women are spending all their money?
The answer is both. So there definitely is a culture. Kind of the big one that everybody talks about is when people enter the military or when they deploy, when they come back from a deployment, everybody gets their dream car. So you see these people who, I should point out, when I say that somebody's making $40,000, that might not actually be money that's entering their account. They might be getting $20,000 and then getting, $16,000 worth of housing, whether they're actually getting money for that or not. And then they're getting another $4,000 worth of food just to kind of clear that up. But yeah, so they're coming back from a deployment and they haven't had a lot of expenses. So they have all this money burning a hole in their pocket and they go get a Mustang. And so you have these 20-year-olds buying brand new Mustangs or Ford F-150s, or they go on crazy $6,000 vacations. I guess that probably doesn't even sound that expensive, but when I was 20 years old, I certainly was not going on $6,000 vacations. At the same time, though, we do have every once in a while these great stories where we hear about somebody who is ending their 4-year commitment And from the very beginning, they've been saving half of their paycheck that they've been receiving, and they're leaving at 22, 23 years old with $60,000, which is just amazing. So there are some out there that are doing it. I want to specifically call out Gina and Matthew and David, who are all active in the ChooseFi group and are all crushing it when it comes to saving up money as enlisted members. They're doing a great job.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. So obviously there isn't a lot of pressure that it's probably hard for us to even understand how much pressure there is to get the new car when you're in that circumstance. I mean, I'm convinced that it is almost like this is just what you do. You feel the weight of it. It's delayed gratification. For 6 months, you can do nothing. You get out, you have this freedom, you have this money, and you've been talking, it's almost kind of a form of small talk that when you get out and you get home and you get this payday, this is just what you do. For the individuals that make this other choice, what do you think it is for them that's giving them the ability or the knowledge to go in a different direction? And for that young person that's maybe 18 to 20 years old, where do they start? I mean, what is it about that person that allows them to position themselves for this different path?
If we're just talking about military members, I think military members have a greater appreciation for freedom than maybe not everybody, but than just the average person, because we, very young, go off to these other countries and see people in war zones who are having to fear for their lives on a daily basis. So not everybody reacts the same way to that, but I think a lot of people, if they think it through, it's a natural connection to go from seeing that and living in a military where you don't necessarily have a lot of freedom because we have a lot of rules that we have to follow, and going, hey, it would be great if in 20 years I can do whatever I want. I can live where I want. I can do the things that I want every day, and I won't have all of these worries that I'm constantly exposed to. If somebody thinks about it that way, I think it's very easy to go, okay, it makes sense for me to maybe eat out at Chipotle once less per week so that I can have that future.
We're constantly looking for ways to describe this lifestyle that we're living and to try to make people understand why we're doing this. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the messaging. I know, Jonathan, you've had some issues with this. And I think you always have to find the message that works for the person you're speaking to. And that freedom message really resonates with me. I mean, me personally, and I certainly understand why it would work with military members. I'm curious if you've had experiences yourself where you've used different messaging and had examples where it has worked and it hasn't worked.
Sure, absolutely. My why of FI was always that all I ever wanted to do was be in the military. I never wanted a different job. It just made sense for me to, once I was done with the military, not work again. I had always planned for that to be my path because this is just absolutely my passion and I don't want to get another job. That's appealing to some people, but my thinking has evolved over the years. So that is what got me from 2004 to 2013. And then in 2013, my sister died at a relatively young age. And so my why of FI has shifted a bit. I still don't want to do anything other than be in the military. But now I also want to set up my life so that once I'm done with the military, I can do all of the other things that I'm passionate about. So that when it comes to the end of my life, I know that I have checked off all those boxes on my bucket list.
Well, I think that's perfect. We've actually spent a fair amount of time talking about the other people, their path, both the pros and the cons. But let's talk about your origin story for a little bit. When you joined the military, are you starting from just basically even? Do you have any student loan debt? If we were going to go back to when your financial freedom clock began, when you got on this path to financial independence, let's go there. How did you find FI and where were you starting from?
I started off very young. I found FI long before I knew that I had found FI. When I graduated college in 2004, I had about $42,000 in debt. That was mostly student loans, but also a little bit of credit cards. And I did the same thing that all military members do, and I bought my brand new car.
Mustang?
It was not a Mustang, thank God. I only bought a brand new Honda Civic. Gosh, I love that car, and I wish I still had it. So, like I said, I knew that I didn't want to do anything. Luckily, in college, I had my financial scare pretty early on when I had missed a couple of credit card payments, and it was tough for me to always pay my bills because I wasn't earning a lot of money in college. So I started learning about financial stuff while I was still in college. I read Total Money Makeover from Dave Ramsey and a few other books. And I kind of understood what I was doing, but I still at that point wasn't really making any money. So I had to wait until I started making money to do something about it. So once I started getting my military paycheck, I, from the very beginning, started paying down my student loans and my credit cards very quickly. And I got rid of that $42,000 of debt in about 3.5 years. And then once all of that was done, I all of a sudden had all this extra money in my paycheck. For the civilian members who don't know how military promotions work, by the 4-year point for an officer, you will have gone through 2 promotions. So right after I finished paying off all my debt, I got my second promotion. So I was earning way more money than when I had started, and I'd gotten rid of all my debt, and I just had all this money. So I started investing it. I started looking at different ways to optimize my finances. And all of my friends thought I was absolutely crazy. Here's the really funny thing. When I look back now at what my budget was, because I'm an absolute dork who keeps my budget that long.
Oh, Brad does too. Don't worry about that.
When I look back at that budget, I can't believe how much money I was spending on useless things. Because back then, my savings rate, which my friends thought was absolutely insane, was still only about 20 to 25%. And now, of course, it's much higher because I've earned more promotions and I'm able to save a lot more. But my friends just couldn't believe it. So here I was. I knew that all I wanted to do was serve in the military. And I knew that that wasn't going to last forever because I'm going to have to get out of the military at some point. Congress actually controls how long I can stay in the military. So I knew that by 50 years old, I had to be ready to fully retire. And that's what I was saving for. That's been my goal now for the past 14 years. And then going back to my sister, when my sister passed away before the age of 50, so I decided to move that up. And so right now I'm on track that I will be actually double FI. So if I earn a military pension, that's enough to cover my expenses. I also am saving and investing as if I won't earn that military pension. So at age 41, I will potentially have both a pension that covers all my expenses, plus all of my investments that covers all of my expenses. So I'm calling that double FI. Then at that point, I can choose whether or not I want to continue staying in the military and doing this awesome job, or if I'm ready to move on to something else.
Yeah, that's a remarkable story. I mean, that's the essence of Fat Fi, right? That's a different definition of it, but 2x Fi, we'll call it. That's really, really neat. I just want to go way back. So you racked up credit card debt in college, but yet then you had the wherewithal to read finance books, including Total Money Makeover. Was there a point in time where you said, I've had enough, I can't do this? How does a 20-year-old or 21 or whatever you were at that point, like, where did you have that point where it shifted? Because there had to be a shift, right?
There absolutely was. I can tell you the exact spot on the earth that I was at that point. I was standing in my living room of the house that I was renting, and my parents had come to visit. And they were doing all the things that normally drive parents crazy, that kids normally drive their parents crazy. So everywhere they went, they were leaving on lights and they were taking long showers. And all I could see was all of this money draining out of my bank account when I went to pay my utilities. And I had a minor, but a little bit of a breakdown. And I started crying because I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills that month. That was the point where I decided I can't live this close to the edge anymore. I have a $20 larger than normal bill cannot be the thing that sends me into tears. So that's when I started learning about budgeting and learning to make sure that you pay your credit card on time each month. And just those little things that make such a difference, because not having that $30 late fee was the difference between whether or not I was able to eat out at all that month or if I needed to eat nothing but ramen noodles.
That sentence you said in there, I can't live this close to the edge anymore. That just hit me like a lightning bolt. I mean, think about how many millions of people live that close to the edge. That's their life. Sure, we talk in the FI community about reaching FI, but I mean, even for people who may not make a huge income or they're living paycheck to paycheck and they can't imagine reaching FI someday. Well, the difference between having $0 in the bank and even having $1,000 in the bank is an enormous mental difference that you wouldn't have to worry about having a breakdown over your parents ran the water a little bit extra. Have you thought about how so many people could relate to that particular story?
Well, that's funny because I think a lot of people can relate to that, but actually I haven't written about it much on the blog because when I talk to military people and when I poll my readers about what they want to hear about, nobody wants to talk about debt. Within the military, it is very much a culture where you don't expose your weaknesses. So people don't want to talk about debt and getting out of debt. They want to talk about how to become rich. So while I do have this story that I think is very relatable and maybe makes people realize that all of these fire bloggers are not these investment geniuses or people who have these huge inheritances, that we're real people too. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to connect with anybody on that yet.
I wonder, I was thinking about this. This particular episode seems like such an obvious place to actually talk about what this optimized path to FI should actually look like. And I think because of your experiences, you could speak to both as an officer, as an enlisted. I'm very curious whether or not it's the same path and if they have more in common than they have different. Like if you were doing the total money makeover for someone in the military that probably is starting with a little bit of debt, but maybe not six figures of debt, like what does this optimized path to FI look like? I think 2018 is a great year to roll this out just because I know the military did just roll out an entirely new retirement system.
Yes, so the new retirement system is called the blended retirement system, and I'll give just a quick overview of that and the old system so people know what we're talking about. So the old system, which is the system that I fall under, is called the High 3 or High 36. That stands for 3 years or 36 months. And basically, for every year that you have of military service for active duty, you would then get 2.5% of your highest 36 months of pay averaged out. And you end up with a pension at the end based on that 2.5% multiplier. But that's it. The only thing that is part of the pension and the monetary retirement is that pension. The new system, the blended retirement system, looks more like what you might find in the civilian world. So it does still have a pension, which is great because pensions are amazing. But instead of a 2.5% multiplier, you instead get a 2% multiplier. So you automatically are taking a 20% cut on the pension. But instead of just taking away money, they're giving you something else instead. So there's two other monetary aspects to the blended retirement system. The first is that for the first time ever in the military, they are actually giving government contributions to the members' thrift savings plan, that 401k that I talked about earlier. So everybody gets an automatic 1% contribution from the government after they vest into the thrift savings plan and into their service. That's whether or not they contribute anything to the thrift savings plan or not. So they can contribute 0% on their own, and they're still going to get some amount of money. It's not a ton of money, but 1% is better than 0%. And then they can also get up to 4% in matching. So an individual has to contribute 5% in order to get 4% matching, plus that 1% automatic, for a total of 5% government contributions. So people would end up having, when they get out of the military, whether they end up staying all the way to retirement or not, they would have a lot more in their thrift savings plan than if they had not been under the blended retirement system. The other monetary aspect is that between the 8 and 12-year point, so in 2018, they're doing it at the 12-year point, but the law says that can be anywhere between the 8 and 12-year point. They are offering continuation pay. It's basically a bonus. The amount of the bonus is going to vary based on how much you are earning and what the multiplier is that year. But it could be anywhere from maybe $5,000 to potentially, if they decide to do a really large multiplier and you're fairly high ranking, you might be looking at $30,000, $40,000, depending on, the particular situation that year. So
Wow.
now, yes. So now people don't have to stay 20 years in the military in order to receive government contributions towards their retirement, which is amazing because most people do not retire from the military. From the active duty, only about 19% actually make it all the way to retirement. And in the reserve component, I think it's only about 14%. So the vast majority of people are never going to make it to retirement, and they're never going to make that 2.5% multiplier pension from the legacy system. So by switching to the blended retirement system, they have this opportunity to earn something along the way. And if they decide to get out of the military, or if they are removed from the military for whatever reason, whether it's by choice or not, they will walk away with some money. So that's a really good deal. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't think it's a good deal because what a lot of people are paying attention to is the smaller pension, and they're not so much paying attention to the larger thrift savings plan and the continuation pay. And most importantly, I keep telling people, this is a lifestyle decision masquerading as a financial one, because what the blended retirement system allows you to do is, if you are not as in love with the military as I am, you just walk away and you still have money.
You are so in love with the military, and I love that. That is amazing.
I love it. It has been wonderful for me, but it is not wonderful for everybody. And I understand that. And so I like that they are finally offering something to these people because, you guys had Grumpus Maximus on, and he tells his story about how he wanted to get out and he felt that he couldn't because he was so close to that pension. And I have so many friends that just are gritting their teeth for the last 5 to 10 years of their career, just trying to make it through. And they are not enjoying their life. They don't like their careers, but they feel that they can't walk away from that money. This is a new path that's available to military members. I think it is something that anybody who is looking to be financially independent, it is the best thing that ever happened to them, because Doug Nordman from the Military Guide loves to tell people, hey, if you are saving 40 or 50% of your money and you become financially independent on your own because you've got that government matching and you've got that continuation pay and you've been saving so much on your own, you don't need to stick around for 20 years.
Oh, no. Well, Doug is listening to this episode and he's hoping that you don't finish this thought because he's coming on the show later this year and he wants to use that exact sentence. So stop stealing his thunder, Military Dollar.
Yes, we say a lot of the same things. I think he is a very smart man.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, we can't wait to have him on as well. But I wanted to come back to what you were talking about in particular. I love the idea. I love the flexibility of this blended retirement system. I think that you're absolutely right. I can see how people would take the short-sighted view and say, oh, they reduced it, but not realize the lifestyle benefits and the freedom and flexibility that it offers. Knowing what the system is now, it almost makes it, to some degree, like, it kind of decreases the importance of showing you exactly what you did on the old system, because I would think that what we want to do is highlight for that person in the military what your recommended steps to them would be. And specifically, if they're enlisted and if they're an officer, how those steps would be similar and how they might be slightly different. What are your thoughts on giving them this kind of baby step path to military financial independence?
Yeah, the two paths for both enlisted and officer are going to be pretty similar. I would say the major difference is that since both the government contributions to the TSP and the pension are going to be based on the military members' basic pay, and enlisted receive considerably less basic pay, it's just a smaller paycheck. In order to get the same end result, an enlisted member would have to save more or work longer. But if they are willing to live on a smaller amount, then I think the steps would be the same. So right off the bat, I would say that as soon as the military member enters the military, they should have thrift savings plans set up and contributing whatever they can. Everybody says 10% is a good number, 15% is a good number. In the FI community, of course, we like much bigger numbers, so everybody says 50%. I'm not dogmatic. I think people should save however much they can reasonably save while still paying off all of their bills and making sure that they're taken care of. But then the real key is going to be in not increasing their lifestyle over time, so avoiding lifestyle inflation, and taking advantage of military promotions and pay raises. So I've never really had a civilian career. Some people enter the military after being a civilian for a while. That's not me. I don't know how normal this is in civilian world, but military promotions are relatively predictable. So I can plot out, and I've been able to plot out my whole career approximately when I'm going to get every promotion. I've been able to tell you that every 2 years, I'm going to get a longevity raise. So what I would recommend that people do is start planning and looking in advance and seeing how much they're going to be able to save in the future.
Are there Excel sheets or tools that kind of help with this mapping that have already been created for this purpose?
There's none that I've ever heard of. I have never used one. I just hand jammed it in. That's probably a good thing for a person who's much better at computers than I am, because I am not good at computers at all. But if anybody wants to create one, I'd be happy to help them with the information that would be needed for it. But it would be pretty simple. They could just say, in this year, this is how much I'm going to be paying, and this is how much the raise is going to be. And if they save 50% of every raise, then their savings rate is always going to be increasing by more than their lifestyle inflation. So if they just keep putting that in, or something else they could do is they could only use, every year we get a raise that's supposed to account for monetary inflation. So if they only inflated their lifestyle by the amount of that annual raise, and they use their longevity raises and their promotion raises to increase their savings rate would explode. I mean, by the time they're at their 10 or 12-year point, they could probably easily have a 50 or 60% savings rate. It would not be difficult at all to get to that point if they started young.
So we know the power of savings rate, and I appreciate you kind of walking us through the blended retirement system. And I'm sure that there are many people that, frankly, that tutorial is incredibly valuable. Just say, oh, okay, I get it. When you're looking at the TSP, I do have a follow-up question. You know, we're big fans of index funds. So when we go to our index funds and we're diving into them, we're looking at, you know, which ones do we have access to? And obviously we have some fan favorites around here. I'm curious, one, about what the TSP has in it, and then what are the expense ratios that are tied to that?
This is amazing, because anybody who has a really expensive 401k is going to be a little bit jealous right now. So all we have is index funds within the TSP. They're arranged a couple of different ways. So there's 5 main funds. The G fund is kind of like a cash equivalent. It's a debt, sort of like a bond, but not exactly. That's based on government securities. Then the F fund is a bond index fund. The C fund is large cap. The S fund is small and medium cap. And then I is international. And those are all index funds. And then we have another option that people can use if they choose, and it's L funds. And the L stands for life cycle. If they don't want to stick with choosing index funds, they can use the L funds and it'll automatically adjust over time. It's a target date fund, if you're familiar with those. And it just over time will get more conservative. I personally am not a huge fan of the L funds for smart investors because they have a lot of money in the G fund. But for somebody who doesn't want to think about investing, it's not a bad option. Now, talking about expense ratios, that's where it gets amazing. So our expense ratios in the TSP are 0.038% for 2016. For 2017, I believe it was 0.033%. So when you hear about these 1% expense ratios, it's just TSP blows it out of the water.
Yeah, well done, military. Really stepping it up for the participants.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good funds in there. And then if somebody wants to, I know everybody in ChooseFi community loves their VTSAX. So if they want to emulate that, they just do a mix of C fund and S fund. And that's it. That is VTSAX.
I'm not sure if you talk publicly about how you personally invest, but which of those funds do you pick?
I don't give specifics, but I have all of my money invested in stocks. So I do a blend of C, S, and I fund in the TSP.
This is great. I really wanted to. I have a sibling that is in the military, and he is currently stationed in Japan. So I hope that he gets a kick out of this episode. Hi, Jeremy. But on top of that, I want to highlight some of these additional benefits. So we spent a little bit of time talking about the pressure of people in the military, some of the marketing that they fall susceptible to that kind of makes it harder to get ahead financially. But now we've kind of gone full circle and we've talked about some of the opportunities that are available from an investment perspective. What else? What are maybe the less talked about tertiary benefits that maybe people don't realize, but people in the FI community, people that are constantly looking to optimize, what are some of the benefits that they've really latched on to that maybe we could highlight for the rest of our audience?
Yeah, if I had to think about two things that I see people in the FI community talk a lot about, it's healthcare, number one, absolutely. And then also what to do about their children and specifically education. So I'll talk about those two and how the military can help with those. So first, for healthcare, if you're active duty, then your healthcare is just free. I mean, I've just never paid for healthcare ever. If you are in the reserve component, then you get healthcare benefits for free when you're activated. And when you're in reserve status, you can pay a low fee. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it might be around $120 a month, $150 a month for full coverage. I once compared what I would have to pay for similar coverage to what I already get. And even with full ACA stipends or benefits, or I don't even know what you guys call them, but if ACA were to supplement my healthcare, I still would be paying $400 a month for about the same healthcare that I'm already getting for free. And that healthcare also extends to families. So it is military healthcare. So it may not be absolutely platinum service because you aren't paying for better service. You are getting the service that's available, but it's free. I don't have to worry about it. If I am not feeling well, I just go to the doctor and I don't have to think about what my deductible is or what bills I'm going to end up with. So that's just absolutely amazing. And then when you retire, if you end up retiring from the military, it's no longer free, but it is very cheap. I want to say it's like $300 a year or just something absolutely ridiculous. Dental is also free while you're in the military, and you can get it as a retiree, but it's actually not as good of a deal.
I feel like healthcare is something that maybe in the FI community, the early retiree is kind of very acutely aware of. I suspect that the 26-year-old that hasn't even really started to process, what FI means, often takes how awesome that healthcare package is for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even start thinking about it until the last couple of years when, I don't want to get political, but when America started talking about Obamacare and the ACA, which I know are the same thing, I started hearing all these crazy stories from friends of mine about how much, a pregnancy was costing $5,000 or a broken arm cost, $3,000. And this person didn't even have health care. And so they stayed overnight in the hospital one night and they got a bill for $20,000. It's mind blowing to me. I have never even had to worry about that. So it's a lot of peace of mind that I didn't even realize that I had. So that's just amazing. It's a benefit that I don't even think you can value because it's just worth so much.
Yeah, you're right. That is probably the most massive hack that is available. I would imagine the second one right behind that we always grapple with is college hacking. We talk about that all the time. It seems like there's something that it's another piece of this puzzle that just seems to be broken. And I know that the military has some options with regards to the GI Bill as well. Could you kind of take us behind the scenes on what the interplay would be for someone in the financial independence community, what the benefits would be?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are in the military, as long as you've served long enough, which for an active duty person, I believe is 3 years, which is about a normal enlistment, you're going to qualify for the GI Bill. And the GI Bill is now worth, depending on where the person ends up going, easily between $60,000 and $250,000. So it depends on where the person ends up going. And you can now pass that benefit on to your family. So what the military member can do if they want to earn additional degrees while they're in the military or earn their first degree is they can use tuition assistance, they can use enlisted education programs, they can use the military colleges to earn their own degrees. So I have so far earned 2 master's degrees that I have not paid a single penny for.
Wow.
Yes. And then you can pass that GI Bill benefit on to your family. You can pass it on to your spouse if you want to, so that they can go get a degree for free, or you can pass it on to your children and you can split it up. So I have a good friend who is doing something that I just think is absolutely brilliant. He's telling his kids that he will pay for their last 2 years of college. So they have to figure out a way to pay for the first 2 years, and then he's going to use the GI Bill to pay for their second 2 years. So he can split that up between 2 people, 4 years total of college. The one thing on the GI Bill that you need to keep in mind, though, for anybody who's out there listening, is you do incur a service commitment if you pass your GI Bill on to a dependent. So you need to do that early enough on in your career so that you don't force yourself to stay longer than you want to.
So I'm curious about that friend who has that amazing plan to split up amongst, 2 kids to pay for 2 years of college each. That sounds like this really cool thing we've been talking about, Jonathan and I have been talking about, having community college, go into community college for the first 2 years, and you can go for a tiny little fraction of even a state school. And if you do that right, you can just pay a few $1,000s at most, and then transfer all those credits to a university. And then in this case, like your friend, they're paying for those 2 years. So that would be kind of a cool little hack. And I guess my follow-up to what those benefits actually pay for. So is that just tuition? Is it fees? Is it room and board? Like, what does that entail?
Yeah, the answer is it depends on whether or not the military member is using that for themselves while they're still in the service, or if they're going to use it, either pass it on to a dependent, or if they're going to use it for themselves after they separate from the military. So if they use the GI Bill while they're still in the military, then they're going to get the tuition paid for and they're going to get a book stipend. If their children use it, or if they use it after separating from the military, they also get a really generous housing allowance. It's a housing allowance that's equivalent to basically what an E5 in the military would receive living in the same area. So it's location dependent. So if you are going to a school in a very expensive area, you can actually get it. It depends on the area, but it would probably pay for a 1-bedroom apartment at the location of the school. If you decide to take an online college, it will give you a housing allowance for that too. So you can choose to live somewhere cheaper, use geo arbitrage to your benefit, and still receive a housing allowance. So there's actually a lot of benefit for having a person that's not in the military use the GI Bill. And then the person who's in the military can use, like I said, tuition assistance or some of the other programs. They can take CLEP at the education office, different ways to get different degrees.
So I wanted to ask 2 follow-ups. One, and you may have addressed this earlier, but I just wanted to zone in on it. How much is this actually worth? What's the max benefit on this? And then also kind of an important piece to that, what's the minimum amount of time served before you're eligible for this?
So for the first question, the maximum amount, it depends on whether or not the person decides to go to a public school or a private school, or you also have the option of going to a foreign university. If you're choosing a public university, the GI Bill is going to pay all tuition and fee for an in-state student. So they're going to consider you an in-state student, and then just all of the tuition and fees are going to be covered. If you decide to go to a private or foreign school, I have the numbers for 2017 through 2018 academic year. That was $22,805 per academic year. So they will do up to that amount. However, there's an additional benefit called the Yellow Ribbon Program, where if the school that you are going to is more expensive than that, some schools will actually cover the difference between the GI Bill and the full tuition. So potentially you could go basically to any school for tuition free, fee free. And then, like I said, they're going to pay for some books and some housing.
How would someone find out whether or not a school is a Yellow Ribbon school?
The best way is probably to go to the Veterans Affairs website. It's just www.benefits.va.gov and type in Yellow Ribbon Program. It'll pull the page right up and it'll show you how to start looking for that. They can also contact the school. There's usually a military rep at every university, and that school will be able to tell you whether or not they participate.
Perfect. Awesome. And we can put a link to that in the show notes for this episode as well. But yeah, that's incredibly useful and actionable. I think there's a lot of people that either, have kind of thought that maybe that was a good idea, but just didn't really know where to start. I think this episode kind of points them in the direction, and maybe someone will be able to take action on this. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
So frankly, to be honest with you, Military Dollar, you blew up even the Fat Fi model. I mean, you're at double Fi, which is just incredible. And there's probably a reason that you've never felt the need to comment on Big Earn's 23, 24 part series on sequence of return risk, because frankly, it's just not a factor for you. But I think what I'd like to talk about just for a second is, the military has been and is your entire life right now, but you also have reached financial independence where you are no longer working for the money at this point. If you are working, it has to be for something else. It has to be for some other reason, purpose, drive, mission, whatever that may be. What does a post-Fi life actually look like for you?
My whole life, I feel this draw to service. That's why I'm in the military, and that's what I want to do in my post-Fi life. I have an idea for a nonprofit that I would really like to start up. I've recently been talking to people about opening up a donor-advised fund to start a scholarship for my high school. I really want to do more for education. I'd like to expand the blog and expand how I talk to people about money, and maybe start teaching some community classes where I can give people the baseline financial knowledge that just sets them up for a successful life. They don't necessarily all need to join the FI community, because for some people, it's just not the right option. But if they can just have that base level of knowledge so that they can have a successful financial life, that would just make my whole life absolutely meaningful. Then there's also the fun stuff. So I really want to travel. I'm interested in van life and tiny houses and long-term backpacking trips across Europe and Asia. And I want to do everything. I want to hike the Appalachian Trail, and I want to have options. That's everything in my life, is just building up to being able to do whatever I want when I wake up that day.
On that list, that incredible list that you just laid out, what would be first?
Probably hiking the Appalachian Trail. I really want to do that now, and I cannot take 6 months off. There actually is a program in the military where now I could take 6 months off. It just does not fit with my career and the way that that's going right now. But if anybody else is interested in that, it's called the Career Intermission Program. I suggest looking it up. But yeah, I definitely want to do that right away. If I don't end up doing that right away, because that is pretty long and I might want to start with something easier, I think that I might like to hike across England. So kind of ease into it.
You describe, obviously, this amazing bucket list and the service that you want to provide, and obviously the service you're providing as an Air Force officer. So to me, there's this kind of interplay here between someone who obviously loves their career, but someone who wants to do so much with their life. And I'm curious, is that a struggle for you? Do you ever think, wow, there would be this amazing life for me outside of the military, but yet, the military keeps drawing you back? Is that something that you grapple with?
It's not something that I struggle with, but it is something that a lot of my friends have struggled with. The reason that I have not had to is because I am not so worried about keeping a job, because I am financially secure and I have that freedom for options in my life. I have made some decisions in my career that have allowed me to go down a pathway that's a little more unusual. And I've gotten to do some things that are really kind of cool. So I have traveled all over the world, which means I'm getting in that travel now and somebody else is paying for it, which is so cool. I have been a part of programs. I'm not going to get into details, but I'm part of programs that you see on the news every day. So I'm having an impactful career that's so meaningful to me. I'm still getting to do the travel. I'm getting to talk to people every day. I'm doing the service that I love. So I kind of get to combine all of those things in my military career right now. Pretty much the only thing that I don't have is control over my time. So I'm going to keep going full bore in my career as long as it's fun. But then at some point, I'm going to decide that I want to take charge of my own calendar. And that's when I'm going to get out. And I'm going to do all the same stuff, but not for the military.
You've been writing a lot of content. And even recently, I know you've put together some very focused content for military members that are interested in starting to optimize their finances and start working towards financial independence. What's going to be the best way for someone to connect with you and to connect with the content that you've been writing over the last several years?
The easiest way is to go to militarydollar.com. You can find all of my posts there. I have a series on retiring on a military pension and really focusing on military fire. And then the other thing that I'm building right now, it's going to be pretty extensive guide, and I have about half of it done now, is just everything there is to do with military money. So everything from buying a car in the military to all of our different pays and allowances. All that stuff's going to be in a comprehensive guide that people are going to be able to download and bring with them anywhere they want.
Yeah, I mean, based on the level of depth that we were able to go to in this episode, I think it becomes obvious that you don't know what you don't know until you do. And if you want to find out more about all these incredible opportunities that are available, I would highly recommend that you go to militarydollar.com and just start digging through the content. Really incredible stuff there. Now, normally on most shows, that would be the end of the episode. But on this show, Military Dollar, we would love to give you the opportunity to tackle the hot seat. Are you ready for this?
I'm very excited.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right. Question number one, your favorite blog that's not your own.
That's a very difficult question because, of course, I read quite a lot of blogs and I'm friends with a lot of bloggers. But I'm going to go to an old school favorite. So I'm going to say Budgets Are Sexy because Jay Money is just absolutely hilarious and really cares about his audience.
Brad, how have we not had Jay Money on the show yet? Weren't we talking to him to have him come on the show?
Yeah, we were. And yeah, honestly, I don't know why we dropped that. But yeah, I definitely need to get Jay on. He's a longtime friend of mine. So yeah, that would be a perfect guest.
All right. Well, question number 2. Now, this is your favorite article of all time. And this can be one that you wrote or somebody else's.
I'm going to be a bit stalkery. So you guys met me in person at Camp Fi, and somebody else at Camp Fi Mid-Atlantic was JD Roth, who I have been following for years. He wrote a post on how and why he sold Get Rich Slowly, and it just really meant a lot to me because he really went into depth about why it was a good decision for him to change up his career path and what motivated him in the first place. And of course, we all know that now he has changed his mind again and he repurchased Get Rich Slowly, which is very exciting for me. But it's just a really meaningful post. And I think anybody that wants to go read about somebody who's taking their life in their own hands and turning it into what they want, I think they should go read that.
Awesome. Huge fans. Both of us are huge fans of GetRichSlowly.org. And yeah, JD is just a wonderful person and a wonderful writer.
All right. Question number 3, your favorite life hack.
My favorite life hack is having a dog. He is my friend. He is a running partner. He actually gets me out exercising, which is important for the military. He's a security system. He will force me to go outside because I, like most bloggers, am an introvert, and I would happily sit inside my apartment for the entire weekend, but I can't because I need to go walk him. So I love having a dog. It's just, he serves so many functions.
I am a dog person too, and I can say, having talked to you for a few minutes, that I thought you would be a dog person. Brad is not a dog person.
Hey,
Brad.
I'm not anti-dog. I just never grew up with a dog. So
he was so skeptical when he came over to record at my house the first couple of times and the dogs came up. He just viewed them as these skeptical creatures from Mars. He's like, what are you doing?
They're so great.
I am very much warming up to your dogs, however. They are lovely dogs.
Thank you. All right, question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
I talked about how I got into personal finance fairly young. So luckily, I haven't had too many mistakes. But one that I have had is really not focusing on maxing out retirement accounts. I, like so many people in the community, thought I really needed a different kind of account to get me from when I stopped working until age 59 and a half. And I didn't realize for a long time all of the various methods that you can take that money out of retirement accounts early. So I actually didn't max out retirement accounts until just the last couple of years, even though I was saving way more than I needed to. So I would just tell everybody out there, if you are curious about this, look into 72T rules, look into Roth IRA conversions and taking out Roth IRA contributions. And there's just so many things that I could have been saving so much money on taxes if I had been doing this all along.
Are all of the traditional FI kind of tax optimization strategies still in place for the individual that is working with the TSP?
With the TSP, yes. One thing that we can't do, military members who retire from the military, is if you are retiring from the active duty, so this does not apply to reserve component, but if you retire from the active duty, you're going to start earning a pension right away. A pension is taxed as earned income. So we will never have that $0 income that allows the rollover and conversion from a 401k to a Roth IRA that allows some people to never pay taxes at all. So it's not the worst thing in the world. I'll take the pension. I'm not regretting that.
I would take the pension too.
But we do have to think about that stuff a little bit more. So it makes it not quite as easy of a traditional versus Roth question as it might be for some other people. However, one extra bonus that we have is if we are deployed to a combat zone, the money that we earn while out there is not taxed. So you could actually max out your Roth TSP in 2018 for $18,500. It'd be tax-free going in. And because it's going into a Roth TSP, it's tax-free coming out. So that is a way that we can get that $0 ever tax.
Wow, that's really cool. The only account that I'd heard of like that was the HSA with the, tax-free going in, tax-free growth, tax-free coming out. But yeah, that's a neat little hack. Obviously, that's only applicable to military members. But yeah, good information for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 5, the advice you would give your younger self.
I would probably say that it's not about the money. It's about what the money allows you to do. I think so many of us get caught up in the numbers and we forget the why of FI. So that's important to remember.
Yeah, that's great advice. And certainly, I think it has to start with your why. That's going to be such an incredible driving force for you and will dictate your decisions even when you kind of get lured in a direction that's really not in your best interest. Now, we do have a bonus question for you. We spend a lot of time talking about frugality. We spend a lot of time talking about not buying the Mustang. But what we want to know is, if you look back over the last 12 months, what purchase did you make that brought the most value to your life?
This is such a little thing, but it is so handy. It's just a $5 item. It's called a Do-Hick key. It's from Night Eyes. Well, I'll give you the link so you can put it in the show notes. But it is just this little piece of metal, and it's a carabiner, it's a screwdriver, it's a scoring tool so that you can open all those annoying plastic packages. It has a serrated edge so you can cut things. It has a bottle opener. I use the carabiner as my key ring. I have it on me all the time, and I have probably used it at least 500 times over the last year. I just packed up my entire house, and so I was constantly cutting tape and using the screwdriver, and I probably used it 50 times just in that one day. So it's amazing for $5.
You don't just use your teeth for that?
I don't.
Not anymore.
No, I'll use my doohickey.
Military Dollar, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a blast.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Wow, Brad, what an actionable episode. I mean, I'm thinking through my notes. What all are we going to be trying to cover on our Friday roundup? And this episode has everything. I mean, I'm not saying it's the final destination, the final stop, but in the context of you don't know what you don't know until you do, this is the episode to start with.
Yeah, I agree. That could be a 3-hour Friday roundup very easily, especially if we really deep dive into questions and comments from the community on every aspect of what we talked about there. That was really a remarkably deep dive in just an hour's podcast, right? So a huge thank you to Military Dollar for coming on and sharing all the wisdom. It was really great.
If you got value from today's episode, if you've been getting value from the episodes up to this point, just take 1 second, press the subscribe button on the platform you're listening to this on. It just lets the providers know you're getting value from the show and you want to be here when we produce additional content. If you want to support us in what we're doing here at Choose FI, here are 4 easy ways. 1, leave us an iTunes review. If you want to do that, just go to choosefi.com/iTunes. 2, use our page to sign up for travel credit cards. If you want to travel the world with miles and points instead of your hard-earned dollars, then just go to choosefi.com/cards and get started today. 3, if you're working on the milestones of FI, set up a personal capital account to track your progress and use our affiliate link. It's completely free and just go to choosefi.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. And 4, and most importantly, find your friends, coworkers, and family members who might be open to this message and tell them about the podcast. Have them start with episode 38, The Why of FI, and right behind that, have them go listen to episode 21, The Pillars of FI. It is a fantastic starting place. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.